So it's now 6:30. I'll call the meeting to order. Please join us in the flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, now is the time for topics from the floor and this is topics that are not on the agenda, and you're limited to 5 minutes, please.
Brady Freeheim. First, I would object to Mr. Kasner being here. He has documented lying on the record. And for some reason, I think integrity is important for the commission, and I think that he shouldn't be allowed to participate and he should resign, or you should remove him. I also note that you are missing 3 people. I think some of those people have been gone for multiple meetings, and you need to take action. Either they should resign or come. And if they can't do that, then you need to remove them or find a replacement. You need all of your people here. It's pretty simple. Then I want to talk about the waterfront. And I don't really know if this is a planning commission or I've already brought it up once to the city council, but the railings in front of the planning and that are installed are awful. They look awful. They look like they're something rescued off the Titanic. I hate them. I don't know who approved it. And I think it really needs to be corrected. And I don't know how that happens. I don't know, again, who's responsible for it, but I haven't seen a single person who likes it. And I don't know if that's going to come from you or the city council. I don't know who does it, but somebody needs to address it. In addition, there are a lot of errors with the construction. Lots of cracks in the pavement that is already failing in multiple places. And again, I don't know if it's the planning commission that takes care of that or who does that or inspects it, but somebody needs to go out and make sure that those are not just patched, but replaced. These are things that should be lasting 50 years, not 5 weeks. Poor construction, whatever. I also am very concerned about the Gracie's Annex, which was supposed to be a remodel. They have now totally removed the one remaining wall that was there. It's now gone. It's no longer remodel. Who are we fooling? It's a new build. And it was my understanding that they didn't have the correct permitting for a new build. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? Because I think they're now in violation. They don't have correct parking. There were lots of reasons why they decided to do a remodel versus a new build. And clearly it's a new build. And I think that is your purview. That's the one I know for sure is your job. And you guys should address that and decide how you're going to address that. I also have noticed that the proactive items, the plaza have now disappeared. I would hope to see it would come back because it's still there. It still needs to be done. And it was on here for a while. Now it's quietly gone away. And I hope that's not a permanent thing because the plaza does need help. And I do think it's something that you guys should plan and work with the county to fix the plaza and make it a permanent fix. Thank you.
Else? Anybody online? Planning Commission minutes dated April 8th, 2025. Corrections or motions?
Unless anybody has a motion, or a correction, I move to accept the minutes as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Vice Chair Cisco.
Aye.
Commissioner Kingsbury.
Aye.
Commissioner Kaplan.
Aye.
All right. Now 6:35. Public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a remand of appeal. AP.1.25-AP.3.25 of the Planning Commission's denial of variances B.1.25-B.3.25. The subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 35732 Hankey Road on map 4N1W-5AB-100. The applicant is Kevin and Catherine McCarter. The owner is Kevin and Catherine McCarter. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? Seeing none. Does any member of the commission wish to declare any ex parte communications or site visits? Seeing none. Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Seeing none. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff reports, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code and ORS 197.7975. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.108.0501, criteria for granting a variance. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described, or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right, Steph.
Deja vu. Here we go again. So this is something that you saw before. It was a matter that the commission disagreed with it. It was appealed to the council, and the council considered it. And I don't stop thinking, and usually as things progress, I add more thoughts, and those added thoughts made the council go, well, there's new things to consider. We'll remand it back to the plan commission. So here we are. As a reminder, these are a few variances which would set up the ability to do a land partition. And the issues were being below the normal 7,000 square foot minimum lot size, being narrower than the normal lot width, and then also a reduced side setback, because the two buildings that the property line would go between is less than 14 feet. 14 feet is what you would want to have a 7-foot side setback on both those sides. So they wanted the variances so that would enable that land partition, and they're still in the fight. So in this packet of stuff, if you approve it, we have the same conditions of approval that were in the staff report that went before you before. That just addresses some of the wonkiness, basically. We also have draft findings of denial that was prepared for the council. So if you saw that, you go, hey, this is for the council, but I had some red writing on there, so you kind of understood where that comes from. And those denial findings are kind of beefed up from the planning commission decision, so they are a little bit different. And naturally, when you spend more time on a file, when you look through it, you learn more, you think about it more. And that's why that denial finding document was updated when it was. What I want to do is go through the same slides that I prepared for the city council. It kind of explains some of the things that we didn't cover before. As we remind ourselves about this and for the other consideration. So here we are. Now the site plan is in your packet. It's something you saw before. We can look at that. Oh no, this is that's an exhibit in the body of the report.
Tell me where to start.
So we want to go page after this one. Okay, so here's the site plan. You can see the existing house, that's a 100-year-old house, sort of in the middle of the property, and then you see the 30 by 30 shop. The idea is to carve off the southern portion, so the shop, which would become a home, is on its own parcel. And there's some shared parking that needs to be done, because we don't want new driveway approaches on Hankey Road, and they kind of have that proposed in the upper right-hand corner of the property via an easement. So this next slide kind of explains things a little bit more with the aerial photo to give you a little bit more visual context. It shows you where that parking is gonna propose there. You can kind of see the old driveway on that other property where the easement would be proposed. It identifies the dwelling, which is a 1895 dwelling, so been there a long time. The shop is a lot newer. It was 2015. So one of the things that the Planning Commission talked about, and for the council, we wanted to illustrate a little bit more, was, so if we go to the next slide, the distance from zoning districts that would allow under that zoning's normal methods, a lot size more in line with what's proposed. Because we didn't have those numbers, and so, well, it's probably a good thing to have them. And you know, it ranges from close to 1,800 feet to around 2,000. And that's for anything in city limits. Anything outside city limits is going to be county suburban zoning, which are generally larger lots. So that's a little bit more information visually than we had before. So if we go to the next slide, now this was kind of the new information that got the council thinking, well, maybe the Planning Commission should have another shot at it. So the reason why we have all these rules, lot sizes, setbacks, things like that, is to have a certain feeling of density depending on the intended density contemplated by the zoning district. And so it's this feeling. And we have these abstract laws and try to apply them in real world situations, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, and that's why we have variances. So if we're thinking about that real world feeling when you're out there, is, does this feel dense or not? One thing that could be considered is the fact that this property is along Hankey Road. Hankey Road is a hill. And what this map shows, there's two things. One, the elevation for the driveway in front of the shop is around 2. And at the bottom of the slope on the opposite side of Hankey, you see that little 139 there. And so you have about a 23-foot height difference. Another thing to consider is that slope, which is pretty steep. It's not the most buildable area. And that property has a lot of flat area. It's about 40 feet wide across from that shop. So not anticipating development on the immediate other side of Hankey and that height difference, is that enough to convince you, well, maybe one more smaller lot is not such a big deal after all? So that's kind of the new information for your reconsideration on this remand. So this is the next slide, just a closer look. You know, we've talked about this and I know the applicants are kind of driven mad by it, but it's, you know, we have to look at past permitting. The shop was not originally approved as a detached structure because we have a limitation on accessory structures of 600 gross square feet in area, and this is quite a bit bigger than that. And they didn't want to pursue a conditional use permit for a duplex at the time. It was a re-roof job. It wasn't put it back up. It is correctable now with our current rules, which allows 2 detached homes. That shop can be permitted as a home. But when you see some of the conditions about that, that's what that's pertaining to. Now let's take a little bit closer look at the distance between those 2 buildings where the property line is going to go. You got to imagine a property line between those 2 buildings and then having different, basically different ownerships, you know, for eons after that. And are you okay with that or not? And then this is just another vantage point between those buildings. And then I figured should have a good street view of the lot. And this one's good because it shows the old driveway that served the home probably for 100 years. And then the newer one that serves the shop, you know, closer to the right of the photo. The old school one is the one proposed to be used for the parking, although that's now on a different property because of a lot line adjustment that was done. So as a reminder about standards, there are 5 variance standards that are supposed to be considered. And all of them, you can check the box on all of them to be cool with the proposal. Basically, it's not significantly detrimental to the purpose of the code. There are some special circumstances unique to that site. It's not a use variance, and usually they aren't. And you're allowing some type of use, so there's a reasonable economic use of the land. Physical and natural systems are not messed up, and the hardship is not self-imposed. So that's the quick rundown of it. With that, any questions for me, and then we can get on with the testimony.
Questions? Anybody? No. All right. Does the applicant have a presentation?
I don't have a presentation. I just have a couple of comments.
Could you step up and give your name for the record, please?
Kathy McCarter, and Jacob did a wonderful, quick, down and dirty
Thank you.
job. Just a couple of things I would point out, just to remind the council, I guess, for reconsideration. The gentleman's home 2 doors down from us is just over 5,000 square feet, his property. So much more smaller than the R7. That seems to be noted often for the neighborhood. And the other comment that I just want to point out is that the topography, which really, I don't know why it slipped our minds originally, is incredibly steep there. And I can't foresee anybody building anything on the other side of that road, which what you see there is most likely probably what's just gonna be there for many, many years to come. So that's why we continue to do this and ask for this to be split. And of course, we're more than willing to re-permit it or put the connector back up. I don't think we'll put the connector back up ever.
Yeah, that wouldn't work for the purpose of the partition.
Yeah, so, but those would be my final comments at this moment.
Great, thank you. Do we have any testimony in support of the application? Anybody online? Neutral testimony, that's those who are not in favor or against the proposal. And testimony in opposition to the application.
Well, I think that you guys made the decision correct in the first place. For the reasons that you stated, I don't need to reiterate what you guys have already said. and the discussion of the staff. But more importantly, I'm sort of opposed to the whole process. You made your decision, it was gone to the city council, and the city council copped out and sent it back to you, and I'm opposed to that process. There's a process for a reason. The city council should have made the decision instead of chickening out and sending it to you. And I really don't see that there's really much new information. And I think you should make your decision and go back to the city council. I guess you can do this forever, but I think the process in general was stupid, and the city council should have stepped up to the plate and made a decision rather than send it back to you with really no significant new information.
The applicant would like to rebut that testimony. You have the opportunity now.
I would, ma'am, sorry, Your Honor, I'm used to being in court. I just want to say that I don't think they shoved off their duties, and they obviously saw something more to this and was willing to take a look at it and take that new information. And the topography of the property is very new information that came about. So I think that is the process, and that's why they remanded it back to you.
Any commissioners have any final questions? Hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision.
Hot potato.
I will start and say that I've looked over this packet quite extensively, lots of highlights from me. And I can't get to where they met any of the criteria. And for me, property across the street has no bearing on the situation. And I am concerned if we go back and change our mind that it's setting a precedent that we don't want. So that's my comments in a nutshell.
It's kind of a tough one. I mean, I do agree with the ability to, appeal and have the council, rather than just throwing out our decision, sending it back to us. That's better than just doing what we wanted. I do see the point where,
Needs to be a little beside the microphone can pick you up.
I mean, I do see the point where I don't feel like it's going to suddenly cause overbuilding in this area. My concern really is the setback and how close these are to each other. I don't know, I'm a little torn.
I agree that the setback seems like an issue. They're far too close to each other. Separate properties in that zoning.
Is each building, Jacob, 4 feet? Is that what this? The inches and 46.
Yeah, I think that's probably a measurement that's a little more accurate, since it's easy for them to get out there with a measuring device, the 2 buildings. But yeah, it is as reflected on this.
I just don't see any kind of new information that changes my decision in looking at it.
Yeah, we feel the same way. Guess I would feel differently if it abutted R7 or R5, but it just doesn't.
It abuts R10.
So it seems like another one of those big asks. Go through the findings or the area.
But then
I
again,
understand the thing about the topography, but I don't see how that really affects our consideration of the different variances that they're asking for.
for me, it's not so much the size of the lots, it's the setback from the property line that the shop and the house have. Because these, there's other lots that are similar in size to what they're proposing. That, to me, it's about the setback for me. Not like you can easily move that much over.
Yeah.
Just 46 inches, that's less than 4 feet.
10 inches,
With that,
3 feet, 10 inches.
yeah,
It's tight. Right. My highlights to see if I have anything else to add. On page 2 of 9, the top where it said none of the city's residential zoning districts have side yard setbacks less than 5 feet.
And Chair. The applicant would like to speak. It's up to you if you want to grant him that ability.
Go ahead, yeah, I'll allow it.
I just wanted to point out that on this same map that's currently on the screen down below. I'm trying to find it. There are actually properties that have 5 feet between them. Down over by the employment office. That between the buildings are actually less than what we're asking for or proposing already in this city.
That's the new development.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the MU. See where that pink
Yes.
MU is at?
In
That's
this
where it's
whole
at.
development, those have what, 5 feet between them? If 2.5 feet, we went and took pictures of it, literally garbage cans, wall, that's it.
Play with that.
Which would really be similar to what we're asking for. Actually, ours would be bigger, more distance between them.
Thank you.
you.
those are semi-attached, is that right, Jacob?
Yeah, that was, they originally wanted to do a detached single-family dwelling subdivision. But the rock excavation and installation of the sewer turned into be a big cost. And so they needed to go to an attached housing product so that it would pencil. And that's why when you would look at the MU, you see those smaller little rectangles. So in the attached product, our code allows 2 to 5 to be attached. Now I'm in St. Helens, I've never seen anybody do more than in pairs. I think it's because of lending, maybe. But that is an attached single family dwelling product, which is not technically allowed in our R7 or R10.
No, I guess my question was, where they're attached, is that where the 5 feet is? Where they're detached, is it wider, or is it all the same?
Yeah, the point where it's attached and a lot of people keep their trash there. That was the developer's approach to having it be an attached product on paper, but give the impression of a detached product. For buyers and for the feeling of the neighborhood.
Would you like to see a picture?
Yeah, we've been out there, but it's been a little while.
So basically then going on page 5 of 9, then they're asking basically for what's allowed in R5 zone. Yeah. me, it's like the Yankee Road's kind of a delineation of where it feels like the country, you know, you're like, you're leaving the city and going into the country. And you go up Yankee Road and there's beautiful country homes there, and as you're filling out Pittsburgh, now you're in the country. But it's just going through everything, everything's an ask. A lot narrows instead of widen, no high density residential zoning in the area. And the big thing for me last time, and it hasn't changed, is that a lot of this issue is self-imposed.
Yeah. I just wonder if we're setting a precedent with a 3 foot 10 inch
Yeah.
setback, you know.
Exactly.
And that's why you want to think of the special unique circumstances. So if you have that finding, that's your insulation from the potential precedent.
Find yourself on that one.
So if someone else comes in, hey, you let them do that, why can't me? If you're finding about the uniqueness of the property, well, this is why this property, because of its unique circumstances, unlike other properties, is why it's more deserving for this special treatment.
But the situation was created by the applicant building the shop.
I think the second half of this is true. I mean. Neither hardship is.
That's, what you're looking at is the page with just general criteria, not
Yeah.
specific to the application.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. It's this page that she's.
Mhm.
You know, when I look at the applications and I go through the criteria and I'm like, you know, it's like a check off. Okay, great. They met A, they met B, they met. But for me on this application, it's like they didn't meet. Yeah. To say yes, they have to meet them all. Prepared to make a motion, one way or the other?
We're moving, recommend or denying the application.
Whatever your motion is, you know, it'd be that simple, based on the criteria?
Yeah, because we've had 2 hearings on this. It's already a body of work, and so that's why I just put the conditions in there. Here are the conditions if you prove it. And then the denial findings were prepared for the council, because we didn't have much of the 120 days left. And so if the council chose to go that route, we wanted to be able to for them to render that decision quickly. So that work's done. So you can deny it based on your packets or approve it with the conditions or some modification if you end up going there.
Based on the findings? You move that,
Variance or the criteria for granting the variances are not met on all 5 of them. I move that we deny the application based on not meeting the criteria for the variances.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Chair Cisco.
We have 3 out of 4, so you don't need a vote. And then, but we do want a motion for signature.
Get a motion for signature.
Also moved.
Okay, for a second.
Second.
Vice Chair Cisco.
Aye.
Commissioners.
Aye.
So similar drill,
Motion.
decision will be issued and
I have to say, we're really not surprised. We kind of knew that everybody was gonna come in with their opinions and it was gonna be. But thanks for your.
So based on where we are in this process, I don't need to read 20, that's the in regards to an appeal. Doesn't apply. Right. Is we're okay on time? Yeah. Right, it is now 7:07 PM. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for 3 variances. The subject property is identified on the count.
Not three variances, annexation.
Oh, it says 3 variants. It is? Okay, this one says McFerrin.
You make a McFerrin script?
What, yeah.
I have the city council.
This council one. Can you pass that down? Yeah. Sorry about that.
All right, let's hear that. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for an annexation. Subject property is identified on this county assessor's map as lot 3000 on map 4N1 W-8 BB. The applicant is Craig and Amanda McFerrin. Owner is the same. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the council wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? Does any member of the council wish to declare, excuse me, the commission wish to declare an ex parte communication site visit? Does anyone in the audience object to the ability of the commissioner to make a fair decision?
I have a question. I'm a neighboring property. Will their annexation affect or change my land use?
Shouldn't.
No, if you're adjacent. Still governed for whatever jurisdiction you're in.
So this only pertains to this piece of property.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Sure. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statement, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, no questions, close the record, deliberations and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to City Code and ORS 197.7975. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.040, 17.28.030, and 17.112.030. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described. or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation which the person believes applies in this, to this decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue and precludes an action for damages in circuit court.
Thank you.
F.
So we have 3 annexation hearings tonight. I'm going to cover this first one. And I want to look at annexations at a high level first. So up until 1993, if someone wanted to connect to a city utility and they weren't inside city limits, you know, they could do so. I wasn't around then. I was in high school still in 93. I don't even know if I used the term annexation yet in my life. I've used it many times now. And I know we have some properties that are connected to city water or sewer. They're just hanging out there and there's nothing on file. But generally anything after 93, if someone desires a connection to a city utility, we require a consent to annexation. And so what the consent to annexation is it's a document that's normally recorded on the deed. And that's important so future owners are aware of this issue. So for the privilege of connecting to that utility, there's this consent to annex. And the consent to annex allows annexation at the city's convenience. Typically, we won't initiate the process unless it's abutting city limits, because that's the state statute that allows a property to be annexed. And contiguousness can mean abutting, but it can also mean being across from city limits by a public right-of-way or body of water, like a river or something. And all of the annexations that I've seen with St. Helens have been these petition annexations. And sometimes we get on them right away. We have one of those tonight where the consent was filed pretty recently. And then other ones, you know, may collect dust in a drawer for a while. And sometimes we'll go through the old ones and see if there's something new. We were already working on some of the other annexations that were that will go before you tonight when this came up. So it was kind of late last year or so, the city recorder forwarded this sewer use agreement for this property on First Street. And it's something that I don't recall having seen. And Sharon Duro, our engineering manager, also hadn't seen it. And it makes sense. It's a 5-year agreement. It's been renewed several times since around 2000. And the person who I think worked on it then, our previous city engineer, Sue Nelson, was probably the one who worked on it. And then once she retired, went before new eyes. And I want to talk about eyes in this case, because that's why we decided to bring it before you here. So we'll look through life and stuff through a different lens based on our experiences. And it looked like back in the late 90s, 2000s, we have the consent to annex, but they never pursued it. And I remember looking at the document and noted nearly adjacent to city limits or something like that. Now, for me, my eyes, I counted them today, and since 2007, we have about 40 annexations, some which were recorded, some which are sitting, collecting dust, waiting to be waiting to be executed. Executed is what I meant, and they say not recorded. And so when I got this last year, and I'm looking through it, having seen many, many annexations, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, this thing's contiguous now. And we look at this map, so there's the property highlighted. First Street is a public right of way, and it's very easy to draw a reasonable straight line between the property and city limits. And so we believe that it was contiguous. We've had a lot of communication with the property owner. And so we are. In annexations, usually we're checking a couple things. One, contiguousness. And then two, what's the appropriate zoning? Sometimes, I think maybe all of these, didn't correct me on hers. We have multiple zonings to choose from, and that can be controversial if it's a high density versus a low one. Some cases, there's only one zoning option, so it's easy. So I just wanted to do a quick little pre-lesson on annexations, just to prime you up for this one and the next one. Because these are all consents that vary, this one's from 2000. This is the oldest one that we're looking at tonight. So, is it contiguous to city limits? Yes. And for annexations, we have to address all these criteria, and it's in the report. It's boring stuff. I'm not going to go into the details more unless we need to. But you do have a zoning option here. So the comprehensive plan for this property would be suburban residential, and we can have a zoning of R10 or R7. So there is a choice in this case. And if we look at some of the other annex, and so everything north of First Street is a higher density zoning district. So if we're up there, we would probably be talking about apartment residential, maybe R5. But below that, you can see how more of it's a yellow shading. That's that moderate density zoning. There's not much of a pattern there, although if you look at Dogwood Lane, which is kind of a weird road that doesn't exist. I think that's one of our annexations from some time ago. So that sort of sets a precedence for the area of R7. I don't know if as staff we have strong feelings of R7 or R10. And how big is the lot? Oh yeah, it's almost a 21,000 square foot lot. So close to a half acre. So we wouldn't be creating any lot size issues. And with the house, the way it's built, it's not too divisible. And really, that's not the intent. The intent is for them to enjoy their property like they have since they were able to get a step system. I've been looking at this map ever since I've been here, and I've seen this little weird sewer line, this organic shaped sewer line, and that was a step system serving this property. Talking to them, it sounded like it was a real battle. I wasn't here, but kind of an emotional thing for them. Hopefully this is not controversial. Basically, you have that choice between R7 and R10. And whether or not you think it should be approved. These annexations are not your final decision. These are recommendations that will be at a future public hearing. That's my spiel.
Ready? Does the applicant have a presentation?
I don't see that.
All right, do we have any testimony in support of the application? Any neutral testimony? That means you are not in favor nor against the proposal. Would you like to come up and?
I don't.
We need your name. You want to come up here and state your name and for the record, and this Microphone thing right here won't pick you up if you're not under it.
Sorry, this is my first hearing, so.
No worries. State your name, please.
Nations, I'm a neighboring property, of Furlock Park Boulevard. And, I don't have any objection or to their request. So that's kind of where I'm a neutral.
Thank you. Thank you.
You sign in, we'll send you a notice when the decision's rendered, if you want to get a copy. You sign in with your address.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, testimony in opposition of the application. Seeing none? All right, does the commission have any final questions? Anybody? Hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. It's pretty straightforward.
Words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a
You need a
zoning recommendation.
I mean, to me, it kind of looks like R7, but
R7 would probably be the default answer. It's not strong.
makes the most sense based on our map here. But behind this one. Number 1 thing.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? By the motion.
I guess I move that we recommend the city council approve the annexation with the zoning of R7.
A second,
Second.
right, then moved and seconded. Do we vote on that since it's, we still vote, okay. Vice Chair Cisco.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Kingsbury.
Aye.
I have that skirt back too.
Yeah, I'll put it right on it.
Right, if you didn't. We'll be the one reading it, so
Okay.
hopefully this one's got the right.
This one also says there are 3 variances.
So you didn't fill out the actual application type. You can have the council one. I did that one. It's like this part. You're not- Unless this one was.
The other one, the final one says the same thing.
Oh, does it? Okay. That's 3 variances.
All right, it is now 7:23 PM. The public hearing is now open. At this time, the commission will turn the meeting over
Oh,
to
no, skip that part.
that part.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's how council works.
okay.
Sorry about that.
So I'm jumping to this is a quasi
Yeah.
judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a annexation. The subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 58909 Furlock Park Street on map 4N1W-8B-2100. The applicant and owner is Bradford and Teresa Bly.
I think it's pill.
Bill?
PYL.
Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in this matter? Does any member of the commission wish to declare any ex parte communications or site visit? Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statement, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. Following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.7975. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for the decision. And my copy here says list criteria.
Kinds of things going on. Let me get you
Here we go. I can do it.
another one.
Yep. Following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision, St. Helens Municipal Code 17.108 or for 040, 17.28, 030, 17.112.030. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff.
Thank you. Great. So because we just had a hearing in this committee, we were very close on this map. So the last hearing we had was just at the kind of dead end here of First Street. This time we're a little bit north and a little bit west on Furlock Park Boulevard. Similar in size, this property is about a half acre, 0.58 acres. It's currently zoned Columbia County multifamily residential, and our comprehensive plan has it at unincorporated multifamily residential. So unlike the last hearing where we had options, the only option for zoning upon annexation is apartment residential in this case. And the comprehensive plan designation would change to general residential. So similar to the last hearing, the property owner filed a consent to annex because they wanted to connect to sanitary sewer. The sewer line was available right in front of the property. Fortunately for them, because they had a failing septic system. And the property is also connected to city water. So unlike the last one, this property connected in 2024. So it's very recent consent to annex. And we like to be efficient, so we like to process annexations in conjunction with other annexations because it's just more time efficient for staff. So that's why we're here. We always look at whether it's contiguous. In this case, it's even more obvious. You've got city limits on the north, east, and west side of the property. So the only area where it's not contiguous is on the south side to city limits. There's adequate public facilities to serve the property. Obviously, the property is already connected. So there's not a whole lot of other things to get into on this. I think it's even more simple than the last one. Any questions?
The only question is, so the current county zoning is multifamily, so it's not a drastic change of any kind from all of a sudden it becomes apartment residential from a, okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks for clearing that up. All right. All right, please, let me see. I'm comparing two, so I apologize for the. Yeah. Yeah. All right, does the applicant have a presentation on this one? None? Any testimony in support of the application? Seeing none? Testimony in neutral, that's neither in favor or against the proposal. And testimony in opposition of the application. Seeing none, so there's no rebuttal. Does the commission have any final questions?
No, my question was residential and you asked it.
I just need that to be clarified. Hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. Excuse me. Feels like we just did this.
Right, it's really straightforward.
Motion.
Oh, okay. I guess I moved to accept the annexation for apartment residential.
Vice Chair Cisco,
Aye.
Hey, Bloomsbury.
Aye.
Right. If you could hand that back to.
Either.
Trina, I get you a second for the next one.
Yeah. This is, time. No. All right. Time is now. Yep, perfect. It is now 7:31 PM. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for 3 variances for annexation. The subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 3700 and 600 on map 4N1W-8CD. The applicant is Paul Joe and Virginia Decker. The owner is the same as the applicant. Because quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias in the matter? Does any member of the commission wish to declare any ex parte communications or site visits? Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of the commissioner to make a fair decision? Seeing none. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.7975. The following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.108.050 and 17.28030, 17.112030. All testimony and arguments and evidence must be directed toward the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, which person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court.
Great.
That
Me again. So for this annexation, we have 2 subject properties, and the reason we're viewing them together is just because they're right next to each other and we can annex multiple properties in one file. So where are we? We're on US 30, so this property will be more familiar to you, most likely. The larger property is 4.47 acres. That is currently an RV travel trailer sales and repair family fun RV. And then the other subject property is a 1 acre residential developed property. It's got a single family dwelling and some accessory structures on it. That's this little carve out here. So that property has a Millard Road address and the other property has the US 30 address. Both properties share an access off of Millard, kind of in the same driveway area where my cursor is. So zoning. Today, without annexation, both properties are zoned Columbia County Commercial General, or C3. And we'll talk about what the city zoning will be upon annexation, but I want to talk about history a little bit first. So we covered that. So in 2011, the single family dwelling property, the Millard Road property, filed a consent to annex and connected to sewer shortly after. Similar to the other one, failing septic. In 2009, the commercial property at the time, Bing's Restaurant filed a consent to annex to city sewer shortly after that. So we've been sitting on these much longer than the one that we just processed in 2024. But since then, we've annexed other properties in the vicinity, and now it's time. We have continuity. Both properties are currently served by McNulty Water. Both properties are connected to city sewer, which runs kind of along this shared property line like this. That's where our sewer system is. So, before the Family Fun RV property was annexed, the county authorized an expansion of the RV travel trailer sales with a 3,000 square foot building meant for repairs. And that was done in 2022. And then in addition, the county also authorized use of the sales building for multiple separate office suites. So you'll see that there's office suites advertised on their signage along the highway. I also wanted to point out, since then, there's been an unauthorized expansion into this green space back here. And the county didn't receive proper permitting for that. And so upon annexation, now it becomes a city enforcement issue, and it's easy. We just need to permit that expansion. But it does mean that instead of the county's problem, it's now our problem.
And it's not a building expansion, it's just a
It's just flat.
usable surface.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. So we always send out notice to utilities. We got comments from County Public Works that there were no comments or concerns. We also got comments from Columbia County Land Development Services from both the senior planner and the environmental services specialist. The environmental service specialist deals with septic systems and just pointed out that both properties have properly decommissioned their on-site septic systems, and those documents were submitted with the county at the time of their decommissioning. And then the senior planner supports the annexation with no concerns. So just pointing that out. So we talked about connection to city limits. This pink property here is something that's touching the former Bing's property, making this contiguous. The single family dwelling is a non-conforming use today in the county zoning, and it will continue to be a non-conforming use in the city zoning. The only zoning option upon annexation is highway commercial for this property. It's currently unincorporated highway commercial in the comprehensive plan. So there's not really a zoning option. That's really all I have.
I want to add just a little bit. This one's interesting because when I first started here in 2007, none of the properties along the highway between Burlock Park and Millard Road were annexed. And there was a restaurant that was having septic issues. Now, this was a little bit before my time. I heard about it when I was at the county, talking to the sanitarian, the septic person there at the time. So DEQ was getting on their case, and this was the Bing's property. And those concerns, those circumstances helped to be a catalyst to a local improvement district. Local improvement district is a selection of properties that are assessed or taxed for some type of public improvement. In this case, extension of sanitary. And that extension of sanitary sewer has, we talked about doing a lot of annexations in St. Helens. And a pretty good portion of those has been because of that LID. Les Schwab is one of those. The old Mark's Customs Exteriors building, which now CCMH owns. So see all that stuff along Furway, all those, none of that was in city limits before the LID. As properties connected to sewer, they filed a consent to annex, which I talked about at the first hearing. And when they became adjacent to city limits. They were annexed. Some were annexed right away, some it took a little bit. So this is a continuation of the annexation of those LID properties. In most cases, and maybe all cases, I can't say that for sure, but in most cases, the ownership has been the same. This is one of those cases where it is different. I remember early on, Agnes Peterson was out there in the front office with Joe Paul, I think was his name. They were out there doing whatever they were doing for a long time. And then here we are back again talking about this property. So it's just been kind of an interesting thing to see. And I thought knowing that history would be important for context on this one.
Right, does the applicant have a presentation on this hearing? Like to come up and state your name?
Never mind.
No? You sure? Okay. All right. Do
Still
we?
advice of quit while you're ahead.
Any testimony in support of the application? Neutral testimony, those in favor, those who are not in favor or against. But for state your name, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Ann Anderson, and I'm here on behalf of Heather Harrison, the sole owner of JH Rental LLC. And she's going to hand you a packet that's been prepared today.
Testimony is in opposition.
Yes, we're here in opposition to the application.
Let me just back up for a second, though. I was at neutral. Is there any neutral testimony before they begin the opposition? Saying none, go ahead.
Okay. Again, my name is Mary Ann Anderson, and this is Heather Harrison, who owns JH Rental LLC. I want to make one correction. At the beginning, you indicated that the owner is the applicant, and that is not correct. The owner is not the applicant in this instance. And so the sole owner, if you will look at Exhibit 1 to this packet that I have provided you, which I had printed at the tax office today, lists the sole owner of this property as JH Rental LLC. So I want that corrected on the record. And just so you're clear who JH Rental LLC is, Exhibit 2 is a printout from the Business Registry of the State of Oregon. And it lists JH Rental LLC with the member as Heather Harrison. So this is the only person who has an ownership interest in the property we're talking about. And when I say the property we're talking about, I'm talking about the property on the highway, not the property on Millard Road. So this application involves the intersection of two legal concepts. The first is a principle of the founding of our government, going back to the founding of our nation, and that is that any right not specifically abridged or taken away by a written law is retained by the citizens. The second is a concept of law of real property, and that is that there is a bundle of rights that you have as a property owner, and you have exclusive rights to certain things as a property owner. I'm sure you're all aware of this. One is the right to possession. The owner can be on their property. The second is the right of control. The owner gets to decide what things will or will not happen regarding the legal status of their property. The third is the right of exclusion. An owner can grant others the right to be on their property, or they can exclude them from their property. The fourth is the right of enjoyment. The owner gets to decide what happens with the resources on that property and gets to use the property as the owner decides. The fifth is the right of disposition. The owner may sell or transfer or gift away all or portions of the property. So the only person with that right regarding this property is JR Rental LLC. Here, the city has suggested that the owner of a property within the UGB has applied for annexation. This was true in July of 2009, but it is not true today. The city has likewise suggested that the sole owner of tax account 14076, map number right there, 3700, 4108 CA 3700, has consented to annexation. This is likewise not true. Finally, the city has suggested that all prerequisites to annexation without an election have been met, including the notice requirements, and that the Planning Commission can therefore approve the annexation application from 2009. This is similarly incorrect. All of these errors add up to only one legally defensible action tonight. And that is that the Planning Commission refused to proceed. That may sound shocking. Do nothing? Yes, that is correct. You have authorities to do nothing. In fact, you have a legal obligation to do nothing on the record before you. I don't suppose you have any water here. Getting a little dry mouth. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're taking that step just because I'm not sure of the procedure. Testimony's time then.
Well, she testified under opposition and the applicant is exempt from time restrictions. So this is kind of a gray area where it's up to you. If you'd like to let her speak longer, it's up to you as chair.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, all of the, so I've suggested a shocking proposition that you are to do nothing. And my suggestion is that is the only thing you can do on this record. So go back to the bundle of rights, the right of control. That right is analogous to another legal concept, and that is the concept of standing. And we heard a little bit about standing today, 3 times when you talked about whether or not you can proceed with a legal action. And that is a concept of standing where if you don't come and you don't talk about it, you don't then have a right to talk about it in a court of law. So standing is the right of someone to bring an action, or in this case, to ask for a type of relief before a governmental body. Here, the relief allegedly sought is annexation into the city, which begs the question, who has the right to ask for that relief? Oregon law says 2 legal entities may ask for that relief. One is the property owner. A property owner has a right to apply for annexation. The city may also apply. Both of these scenarios are spelled out in state law. And both of these scenarios require the city considering annexation to follow the requirements of state law as set forth in Oregon statutes and in any applicable city charters. So starting with that topic, who applied for annexation? The staff report says Paul Joe did. Who is that? Well, one thing is clear. He does not have any ownership interest at all in this property. He is also not a citizen of the city or even of the county. As pertains to this property, his only role is as a former owner. He does not currently own the property. This means he does not currently have a right to control the property, and that in turn means he does not currently have the right to apply for annexation. The sole owner of the property, as I stated, is JH Rental LLC, which is a single member owned LLC owned solely by Heather Harrison. JH Rental LLC has been the exclusive owner of this property since February 4, 2022. And if you will look at Exhibit 2, that is a printout printed today of the entire ownership history on this property dating back to well before 2009, 2005. So those pages, I think there's about 5 or 6 pages. If you look at the second or the next to last page, the date is 4th February 2022. It says there was a warranty deed given. And if you look at the last page, it says who was removed and who was added. D is deleted, A is added. Hampton Heights LLC, which was another intervening owner on this property, sold to JH Rental LLC. So JH Rental LLC is it. So did JH Rental LLC file an application for annexation? No. Does JH Rental LLC consent to annexation? No. Is JH Rental the only party who has standing to submit an application for annexation and to consent to annexation? Yes. So now that we know who has the right to control this property by virtue of their ownership interest, let's talk about what is before you on this record. And I would also say, since I mentioned we're going to talk about what's on the record, I object to some of these side issues that were brought up that are not in the record. I copied the entire file today, this morning, and none of this business about septic this or septic that, local improvement districts, or about this dispute, which Heather Harrison disputes about whether there is or is not an unauthorized expansion of something.
I'm gonna ask you to wrap it up here.
Okay, and that's not in the record. Okay. So the city wants the property annexed. And not only does it want it annexed, it wants it done without an election. This request is in direct conflict with the city's own charter, which specifies annexation, delayed or otherwise, may only be approved by clear majority voting. This takes us back to, does the city have the right to swoop in and annex the property at its leisure? How did we end up here? The city contends it has authority based on Senate Bill 1578 from 2016. And if you look at another exhibit, I have submitted as Exhibit 4 that Senate bill, which is listed in the staff report. And that Senate bill has nothing at all to do with annexation. It talks about tax credits for film companies. So I looked around because I thought, well, they can't be doing that. What are they talking about? And I landed on this statute. There is a road to annexation without an election, but that's spelled out in ORS 222.127, which is Exhibit 5. However, you must exercise caution because, again, the city proposes to annex property and it must do so within the confines of that statute. And this is probably the most important point right here. The city says Paul Joe is the applicant based upon an application and a consent, both signed July 27, 2009. The city points out that that was a recorded document and probably will point out, oh, it's binding on everyone that follows. This is true as far as it goes, but how far does it go? State law clearly answers that question. It goes for 1 year and 1 year only, unless the owner signs a separate document waiving the 1 year limitation. There is no such document. That statute is ORS 222-173.1. And if you look, that is Exhibit 7. And it specifies that these consents to annexation are good for 1 year. They're not good when the city sits them in a drawer and lets them collect dust. I was very pleased to hear that your second application was based on a consent from 2004. That is appropriate. We would agree if we were sitting here in June of 2010, Heather would be bound by the consent filed by Paul Joe had she bought the property back then. But we are now 15 years later. And that consent the city is purporting to rely on has expired. It cannot be relied on by you. Pursuant to state law, it has expired. There just is no way around that problem. And the application for annexation is similarly expired and of no force or effect. The application was signed on the same date, July 27, 2009. And the face of the application states that the applicant should allow 16 to 24 weeks for processing. That's 4 to 6 months. And that time period expired clear back in 2009. The only entity who currently has any right to apply for annexation is JR Rentals LLC and its sole owner, Heather Harrison. She has not applied. She does not consent to the annexation. And if you could get past those issues, the city has one other insurmountable procedural problem. ORS 222.120, which again is an exhibit, provides the procedural requirements, including notice. The staff report claims that notice was published in the Chronicle on May 2, 2025. The Chronicle, if you look at Exhibit 9, according to the South County Chamber of Commerce, went defunct as of September 25, 2024. It does not exist, and there could not have been any notice published in that paper. State law requires publication 2 times prior to the meeting in a paper of general circulation in the city, and no such paper exists. The facts are clear. No valid unexpired application to annex exists. The application on which the city relies expired 15 years ago. The consent on which the city relies expired in July 2010. The city categorically has not and cannot comply with the notice requirements to force annexation without an election. In short, there is nothing for the Planning Commission to act on, and the city is out of bounds to suggest otherwise. The Planning Commission should do nothing. Barring that, they should deny the proposal.
Thank you. Sure to go here with the rebuttal by the applicant.
Well, they chose to go with the denial stage, so I think we would just continue with the normal, any more opposition.
Is there any further testimony in opposition? The commission have any final questions? Only question would be, why do we have this packet from the applicant now and it wasn't included in time for our packet so we could really review it? What's the
Well, public
procedure?
hearing, they can submit it, anytime, and it'll be info for the city council.
Hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. That's interesting.
I mean. Do we ignore it?
To me, there's,
Deny?
I don't see how we can do anything on it tonight, other than I guess deny the application. Or are we denying the application, or are we just doing nothing?
That's what, yeah, what do we do?
And the application is one application, so it's not that the house can go.
You're a recommending body to city council, and that hearing is June 4th.
You know, we haven't had time to look at it. Some of it, been through a lot of these. Attorney A has their arguments, attorney B has their arguments. That's the strategy. We'll have to talk to our legal counsel about some of this stuff.
Okay.
Don't have an answer, off the cuff.
The thing right now is the packet or the annexation proposal to us is as a consent annexation.
The consent on file and the application on file is from a previous owner as stated. We don't disagree with that statement. Yeah.
Yeah, and the election is not required. And maybe the bill was incorrectly cited in the staff report. We can check that, but just legal details.
Just a note about the Chronicle. It's a template staff report. It's notified the Spotlight. It was published for our code requirements.
We
So
have the affidavit.
I have the affidavit that it was published, but that was
I
cited.
thought that I had read it was the. Spotlight or not the.
What would the applicant have to become then the city? Is this application no longer valid?
Well, I think it's a question that we need to run.
So should we do?
The applicability of the 1 year thing.
Yeah, it's really.
Yeah.
Seems like with what we have presented now, we. Decline the application and let the,
That's what I think.
do we have a motion then?
Sure, I guess I move that we deny the application as written.
I'll second it.
Vice Chair Cisco.
I,
Commissioner Kingsbury.
I,
All right. No written decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the city council.
The recommendation.
Nation, does, okay. Right, we are on to. Discussion items.
Yeah, this is a much lighter note.
Say, this is you, right?
Yeah, it looks like we have a commissioner step out real quick. Oh, wait just a minute. We can go to recess just a minute. I'll mute the mic. Okay, so this is an architectural review for a new sign. So this is at 161 St. Helens Street. I don't know did you guys all receive a copy of what she just handed out?
Yes.
Okay, I think maybe just the digital version had some sheets missing.
Oh, okay.
So I'm glad you've seen this before. I just can't pull it up for some reason. I only have this version.
Okay.
Cool.
Good night.
It's nice to see what it looks like at night.
Yeah, it is. And we do have our applicant Dale Clark with Clark Signs here if there's any questions for him. But I'll just cover the sign stuff briefly. So as you know, any exterior architectural change down here requires architectural review. And our guidelines have a specific chapter on signage. And it's specifically about neon. And it says neon is acceptable, although it can be restricted in size. And it should not obscure architectural details or overly illuminate display windows. Neon lights should have an authentic period or handcrafted look and should not flash or otherwise vary in display. And I also pointed out there's a couple of existing projecting neon signs downtown, including our theater, Marquee, City Hall, and Molly's Market all have neon signs that obviously City Hall sign has not gone through approval, but Molly's Market has, and the theater had a historic neon sign. I also included in your packet a copy of First Street from 1930, and you can see in that there's a lot of projecting signs. It was really common back then. As far as size, the handout in front of you shows that the size is about 1.6% of the building elevation, and that's important because our sign code allows 12%. And so really this sign isn't overly large, which is what the guidelines talk about in restricting size. And our code allows 20 square foot per sign face, and the new sign is 12.5 square feet. So a little bit more than half of what's allowed. Clark Signs also wanted me to point out that the lettering, it's a little bit deceiving on the images. They're only 8 inches in height. So it's pretty small lettering in terms of like the font itself. So I don't know if you guys have any concerns with this. To me, it didn't seem counter to the guidelines anyway, but
The only question that came up was the white back. If you look at the majority of historic signs, they're not white. And
would you have a different proposal or just a darker background in general?
it seems like a fine line between looking historic and looking like a plastic or metal box with neon on it. As you know, I go head towards the historic look of it, so.
Yeah, I wish I could pull up that image that you guys have to look at it, but. Yeah, obviously it looks different at night than in the daytime too. You want to ask? Yeah,
I like it better at night.
Yeah. You want to ask him and we can talk about it? Did you hear the question?
Yes.
Why the white background?
Because you have dark letters. And, Sherlock's, white and green and white is green and white, the awning's green. I'm not sure what the building is, but it's
It's an off-white, pale.
it's off-white.
And will there be any visible means of hanging it that you'll see, like wires that have to hang?
No guy wires or anything. There's going to be a pipe. There's awning there off the building. And we're going to go right into the awning. All the way, right back to the building. It's concrete building. And it'll attach to the wall. It'll be, actually, there's no braces or anything that'll be visible from the street. It'll look like it's part of the awning.
Right.
I gotta admit, I did not think that I was gonna like it, but I do. I guess I was picturing a little more of, you hear neon sign and you feel like it's
Vegas.
a little bit, or like a Budweiser sign or something, but I think it's really nice. I kind of agree about the white. It'd be nice if it had a little bit of it, like a mint green or a light,
For just a line to go from, it's just a white box with pretty letters on it. If there was some kind of border.
Or vinyl letters on it, and then the neon outlines the Sherlocks and is a single to red on the grocery.
If you look at the back of the packet and the, he mentioned. Probably bordered in neon, maybe, I'm not sure, but. It seems to be a consistent like border line.
Yeah, they have like a little bit of a border around
Something.
them. Yeah, something to make it look a little less, boxy maybe.
I've got a drawing here that I made a dark background,
Oh, yeah.
but
And Dale, if you see it, like on these, like a little bit of a border
oh,
on the
well,
edge.
something like that could be put on that.
Oh, I like the
white
dark
background.
though. Yeah, we like that.
I don't know about, but
Yeah, I like that, or the
I
idea.
had
of doing-
thought about making it green background to start out with,
Mhm.
because the same color as the awning,
Right.
and I don't think the owner was real pretty. Yeah.
Maybe a green border around the
I
white.
can put I could put
Still, I think it would be nice to have a border around it.
we could have a light green border around this cabinet. It's just the letters are only 8 inches tall. And
Yes, you
on
don't
Sherlock's, the uppercase are 8 inches tall. Marcus 8 inches tall, and
Mhm.
so that makes the lowercase quite a bit small.
This is all.
Is it gonna be grocery or market?
Oh, it's grocery.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that, yeah, that was one of the problems I made. The market. But
Yeah, I guess
you
that's
can
true.
put that in the file and
I would say
I really like that one.
the dark sign with, I still would like to see a border around it just
Yeah.
because it looks more historically correct. Just the box.
So we could, so you're making a recommendation and I can incorporate that into our permit. So I'm hearing dark background. I don't know if I can really justify a line, an additional neon line, but certainly the dark
Not even a neon line, even a painted line on the box, something
Yeah.
that delineates it just being a hanging box.
Sure.
Yeah, if you look at the back of this one, where Emil Nilsson, there's like just a tiny border right around
Oh,
the
sure.
edge. Do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it just gives it that finished sort of.
Sure.
It takes it from like 1970 to
Something of
Yeah.
the era.
I can add to incorporate some kind of border.
But it's well done. I mean, it was not what I was expecting in a good way.
The all white ones.
Are you amenable to that, Dale?
what is it?
Some kind of border? Even, it doesn't need to be neon.
Painted border, a vinyl border,
We
something.
probably just do a border around the outer part of the
Yep.
sign,
Yeah.
That's all we're talking about, yeah.
maybe a light green or something like that.
Yeah, that would be nice.
And that way it'd break it up some.
Yeah, look a little more.
You didn't like the dark background though,
He
right?
didn't like the dark background.
Okay, so are you comfortable with just the border? If it's a lighter
I am.
background?
That's fine.
I mean, I like that one better, but it's his sign.
Okay.
What about our side commissioners?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know they're staying quiet.
You need to agree. I do like the darker, or a border. I think either or would be great.
Okay.
I do prefer this one
Well,
first.
even though he's here and he's responding, let's be a little compromising, right?
Yep.
Okay. Can I get a motion that you're amenable to this? It complies with the guidelines with a border.
Make a motion that it complies with the guidelines with the border.
Second.
Great, thank you.
Do you need a vote or just the motion?
Nope, you gotta vote.
Vice Chair Cisco,
Aye.
I,
So Chair Shoemaker, I would request we go for your information items. We have two things, one that's probably quick, and one that, I don't know, we'll have to see. But some of the people here are for that. So the first one I wanted to talk about was the sign for 50 Plaza Square. And I'm doing the.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so there's just 3 slides here. This should be a familiar building. It's, I don't even know why I took a picture. You just gotta look out the window.
I should disclose I'm the owner of the building.
So we got a sign permit, and it was kind of late to put it on the agenda, but it appears to be consistent with the planning commission's decision back in 2018. So December 12, 2018 meeting, we discussed a sign proposed on this building, and this was the proposal. This was the proposal after the planning commission saw it. The planning commission had concerns about the proportionality of the font in relation to the background, the negative space. And so this was the revision that was submitted, submitted with for the final plans. Because the commission has kind of already discussed it, and the new lettering, Borton Law, is consistent with the size and everything else is going to be the same. I figured, well, you approved it before as a group. The easy thing is to get a consensus that it still honors that, rather than going through a little bit more of an architecture review. So just looking for smiles or frowns. Is this enough? Do you feel that this is sufficient?
I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. It's just not for me.
I think it looks well like what was approved before, just 2 different words.
Yeah, so that's why I felt, well, instead of having something in the package, probably okay if we just threw it at you. That way, the sign permit can run quick. Cool. Okay. So the next one has to do with Gracie's Annex, 325 Strand. And I just have a few pictures in here. This was, back when was that building? In 19. And some side views, what it looked like, same time period. And then there was a demo permit around that time period. They started investigating it, and then there was a pause for several years until the more recent effort. So this is from the approved plan set. And if you recall, we discussed this quite a bit, this property. We're in the Riverfront District. In the Riverfront District, we have certain flexibilities recognizing the developed state of the downtown. And that includes parking exemptions for properties where the building footprint occupies more than 50% of the lot. And if it's a remodel or something like that, you retain that parking exemption. So in this case, they applied for a variance, and it was a very ambitious variance. And it was one that generally, it was denied. It wasn't favorably. And the hope was, well, then they could demo the building easily and build from scratch. But it was it was a pretty grand plan, wasn't successful. So then, obviously, they wanted to retain that parking exemption, and it has to apply to a remodel, not to new construction. And so in our discussions with the architect, and the architect is here online, and then we have the builder and the owner here in person. So these plans were developed that phased the construction work. So it remained a building, and the code defines a building as walls and a roof. Basically, you retained enough of a building in phases that you do lose that status as quote unquote existing structure. And so, going out there, checking it periodically, the concern early on, because our building official was concerned about the building collapsing. And there was concern that, man, if this thing collapses, they're done. Luckily, it didn't collapse. There's been no injuries that I'm aware of. And for a while, I'm like, cool, good. Because this parking, people are crazy about their parking. And over the years, we've seen people invest in their buildings. In fact, at that variance, we had some of those people testify in opposition to it, given the investment that they put into existing buildings. So this one, I was kind of worried about it towards the beginning, but after a while, I'm like, cool, it's moving fine. I don't have to sweat it anymore. The building gets done. We have a site development review afterwards, and it's all easy. But so I got this message to check from Columbia 911 about an address question. So go out late morning in the middle of the week, and I'm on First Street, and I'm like, man, I can see the river from a vantage point. I haven't been able to see the river before, and it's because I'm looking through where there was a building. So here's a couple of pictures of phasing. This was before. It was like, so then if we go to the next, so this was that day that I went out there, and this was that vantage point. And then I'm like, oh, what's going on? So we just have two walls. And the phasing plan was, the intent of the phasing plan was one wall at a time, so it wasn't so stripped down. So when we saw this, and based on the history of parking concerns, the history of development in the downtown, the development which is going to occur, not wanting to set a precedence, we're like, crud. We're at this stage now. It went far beyond what was intended. So building official put a stop work order on last week. And so the builders came in. They actually came in for something else, and they just happened to get the bad news submitting a revision. And so, I'm like, oh God, what do we do with this? If we were being sticklers, we would say, this is no longer a remodel, this is new construction. The parking exemption doesn't apply to new construction, and the fact we were trying to be really flexible with this building, deferring site development review based on a remodel, so that the new uses would cover that later on. But now we're kind of in this awkward circumstance. So normally for new construction, we would require the land use permitting. That's what I'm talking about with the site development review, where we examine things like landscaping, parking, access, stuff like that. So one could argue that we're kind of at that place now that this building has lost that right to be considered existing and a remodel. But I said, okay, well, the planning commission meeting is next week. Too late for the agenda, but can at least have a discussion. And maybe the commission's like, well, you know what, staff, maybe you're just being too ornery. And we can take that into consideration. So if you'd like them to speak, they're here. That's kind of what we're at. And this, so I guess I'm curious, most of you, sorry, you're getting into this kind of late, but most of you have been through a lot of this, and so should be familiar with it. And there's a lot of people looking at this. What I don't want to see is 5 years down the road, hey, you let this person do it, why can't I? As it relates to that parking provision. So that's kind of where we're at. We're kind of in this sticky situation. I told the builder, if they could present the reasons why they did that, that's something that we can consider. So we're kind of in new territory for decision-making in St. Helens. We haven't had to deal with this kind of situation. There has been existing buildings that have been renovated, like the Muckle building, now known as the Waterside, but not to this extent. So we're kind of in a new world, and that's why I'm like, well, let's have a discussion with the commission. So you'd like to
Yeah, we've got a package here for everybody to see. In that is a statement summary as from the building architect. General contractor, this is the owner, Brett McCoy. My name is Chris Lucero, I'm a project manager, overseeing the job as well. Inside that packet is a statement, just kind of summarizing the issue at play. And then also included in the document as well is a timeline and just kind of has the sequence of events that got us where we are right now. And then there's also some photos in there too to kind of show the phasing that's been done to date. And then the very last page is our contract schedule. It's timestamped from January 24th, and it includes our full construction schedule with the phasing allocated through that. But so that's what's included in the packet. I do actually have it on a thumb drive too, so you need to put it on the screen.
Yeah, for electronic, we can't accept
That's fine.
electronic media, so
Okay, yeah.
that would be something in advance that we could.
With that too, just as you're looking at the packet, everywhere that there's a question mark is the letter F. The printer had a little bit of a snafu, so everywhere there you see a question mark is supposed to be F.
So if I could ask a quick question, Jacob, before we dive too much into this. Can you refresh our memories about what the parking variance is? And then Trina wasn't on the commission then, so she might not understand exactly what that parking variance is, what they'll have to do differently in regards to parking.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so. Like most traditional codes, there's a parking standard. And the amount of parking depends on the type of use. So like if it was apartments, generally it's a number of parking spaces based on the size of the apartment unit. So a studio needs 1 space, 1 bedroom, 1.5, 2 bedroom, 2. For like an office use, it's 1 space per 350 feet of area. So there's a calculation. Now, in this area with that 50% coverage, we can just throw out the calculation. So the numbers don't matter. It doesn't matter what the equation is. We don't have to do the math. It's just exempt. So the building could be 1 million parking spaces or 3. It's exempt. But if we were dealing with new construction, that's where you would have this land use permit and the parking equation would apply in that case. So, okay, well, you need X amount of parking spaces, and then where are you going to put them? So a parking variance would be a way to reduce the normal code requirement. So let's say the code said you needed 50 spaces and they had room for like 40, they got a variance for 10 spaces. The variance that was applied for before was for a much bigger building. And I can't remember the amount of spaces, but it was a lot more. So in this case, as far as grace, are you okay giving grace based on, discussion today and saying, well, we're okay, it's still being a remodel and that's something we can consider. In which case, we can continue to not worry about that equation. But if it falls into new construction, we have to consider that a new equation. And we have to consider that new equation through our bureaucratic permitting process. And so that's kind of the major issue of discussion given the site. So does that make sense? Okay, sure.
A good brief statement. I'll try to be brief. But my name is Brett McCoy. I'm co-owner of Artis. We're a general contractor. Both owners are local, Columbia County, raising our families here, and as is the owner of the property. I have just a brief statement we wrote. This is in front of you. Chris explained what's in the packet, but Artis understands the importance of adhering to the agreed upon phasing plan. We understand it quite well. Recognize its purpose to ensure orderly development and compliance with city codes and processes. Unfortunately, due to a scheduling coordination issue with one of our subcontractors, I'll just add that we deal with on this project is fairly small for us. We deal with small subcontractors. This is a really unique situation, with small contractors. Someone gets a flat tire, they don't show up, they have a family emergency, they're not going to be there for a week. These are people, human beings, So we had a coordination issue with one of our subcontractors. The removal of the east wall occurred as Jacob mentioned, prior to completing the preceding phase as outlined in the approved plan. Additionally, due to safety concerns, I'll just point out that our company, one of our core values, is safety. I see that we share that value with the city on position statement or all there. Safety is paramount for us. We make every decision starting with that. Due to safety concerns, much of the roof structure had to be removed ahead of schedule. There was just no feasible way to safely maintain the remaining severely compromised sections without immense life safety risks. We believe we kept the structure in place as long as physically possible while balancing the safety risks against strict adherence to the phasing plan, and the outcome have been an injury-free project to date, which I think is a huge win. We want to convey to the committee that has always been our sincere intent to comply with the required phased construction approach, and this process has been meticulously planned and executed with the exception of the items above. What you have, in this packet is a summary of the actual dates that we have evidence of through daily reports, through inspections that are recorded at the city of this phasing plan. And everything we did in the way of contracting, procuring, inspecting, et cetera, has been, it further substantiates our intent to comply with the phased workflow. Value our relationship with the city of St. Helens and appreciate your support in this issue. We really are just asking for understanding in this matter. We hope, you consider allowing construction to proceed and constructing this new high quality commercial building that will hopefully become a great amenity to the city, the St. Helens waterfront. I just also want to recognize that this is, kind of as Jacob described, it's not an issue that happens every day. This is new for us. It's new for the city. It's a weird way to do things. If you flip through the packet of pictures, we think very strong evidence that we did in fact comply. I mean, even that picture there is evidence. And there's two walls standing. There's two parts of a foundation, and it's just strange. People are probably asking, "What the heck is going on here?" It's different. The owner has paid that premium for the pure intent to retain that building square footage, and it's quite frankly a huge premium. If this was built in normal construction, we would demo that building in a matter of 2 days and be building the whole foundation and then framing the entire thing.
Excuse me.
And we'd have much more control over safety and the whole environment. It's sort of a novelty project, and we really are just kind of asking for some lenience here, really in the name of safety and just being human. We are not cowboys. We are construction professionals. We follow rules. Oftentimes, every day, handling issues of life safety. So we take that really seriously with not only how we build, but the gravity of the situation is that, if the decision was made to pull back this approved projects that's in construction, the financial impact would be just obscene. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the ongoing life of this building and potential revenues. It would be rushing to local small businesses. Yeah, so we just ask for some amount of leniency and grace. I heard you, Jacob, say at the very beginning of this meeting something to the extent of when codes are sort of a little bit gray, it's kind of going by feel, as you said. It was one of the very first things you said in this meeting. And I can't agree more that in some cases where it's a little bit weird, you have to kind of just trust your instinct. And I think that we more than prove that we are trying to meet that spirit. Basic.
mobilized on January 6th, and so it's been 85 working days from the point that we had the stop work notice, the point we mobilized, and that's what we have to currently show for it. And 80, that's about 17 weeks of construction. And the reality is if this was a single phase project, we would have handed the keys over 2 to 3 weeks ago, and none of us would be in this room. With through the phasing, it's taken, I think it's on the second page, going from the south to the north wall, a full month just to get those 2 walls built. In between those phases as we started working through. And then with the roof structure collapsing that's therein, it ended up necessitating for us to have to kind of get ahead of that phasing plan just so we can keep people safe because it was a collapsing structure. We do have pictures to show and the evidence that's in there to show we did brace it up. We had an engineered shoring plan, third-party structural engineer to put together a shoring plan for us so we could work inside safely. But as Brett mentioned, I mean, sometimes you do have to go with the feel, and if it's falling, we can't have people inside there. It's not a safe working condition, and I don't want to have a loss of life on the project that I'm working on, or to put them in a position where they feel unsafe when they're at work.
Stand behind our decision that we made, and we feel like
We know what year that building was built, you know?
Not offhand.
it wasn't maintained.
It's been tacked on, yeah. So, yeah, various
Yeah.
degrees of.
We've all been in it when
years.
it's the last days of Gracie's Antiques and worried if we could get the armoire out the door before the roof came in. So we understand that a lot.
I don't know if you're aware, but really the main street of St. Helens used to be in front of Gracie. It all burned in a fire in 1904. And I believe that building survived the fire. That's why I ask.
Interesting.
But for me, unfortunately for you, you're sitting in front of a preservationist and I give you no grace. So, it is clearly new construction. There's nothing. I walk by the building every day. I've made inquiries about the building as I watched it being torn down. I've done several restorations myself, including the building across the street. I know it's cheaper to tear it down, but for me, clearly it's new construction. It has nothing to do with any kind of restoration. It started with demolition by neglect by the property owner and just gone.
Well, I think
From
we
there.
knew in the beginning that it was going to eventually all into being new. I think it was all about the footprint and if they maintained the structure the entire time, correct? Is that right? Or am I looking at that wrong?
Yeah, we had an architectural review. We haven't went through site development review, but because this plan included a new face.
Yeah.
We did have that architecture review.
So none of this was going to remain ever. It was all going to be new, which is how they built it,
Yeah,
correct?
it was just about how can you maintain this as a building?
Yeah.
So we don't lose that.
But at some point, it goes away. I mean, it's, yeah.
Yeah.
If you look at the very last picture that's inside of the packet, you can see the front elevation of the east elevation, the west wall footing is pouring. The east wall is still standing. That picture was on 429. Whenever that photo was taken.
We kept.
This was photo that might have been taken here, must have been either the day or two after that, but. In the scheduling issue that came into play, the west wall was supposed to have been built there and that, but our framing contractor ended up having a lapse in coordination and couldn't show up to work. That east wall, what was left of that east wall was skipping over and falling down. So we thought the safest thing for those that are around it was to take it down in a safe manner rather than having that fall onto the street or anywhere thereabouts.
And I know there were some challenges with this building too, because the original building sat right on the property or a little over on the property.
Had a setback of 1 foot on each.
Yeah.
From the initial there, and then we also moved the building
Yeah,
back.
I mean, I think
set
it
one
was, the
foot.
property line actually ran underneath the building.
It was right above, yeah, right against it, so there was a plan revision that went through to decrease or to set the building back a foot from each property line or to ensure over a foot from each property line, so the structure wouldn't maintain. There's a footing drain that runs along the new foundation that would have been. That's one of the decisions in the plan revision to change that.
There's nothing left of it. It's clearly new construction.
Never, there's never going to be.
Yeah, it's always gonna be completely new construction whenever the final product is
Right,
finished.
I understand that.
And the phase is to get the center bearing column set and to build the roof. Does require the west footing and the east footing. There.
I guess.
So. Only. First, I clarify something you said towards the beginning. When we got started talking about it, that, we didn't like this project, or you didn't say that, but you said something like that, and I want to at least put my thing on there is, we loved the presentation that you gave before about the building. Or I did, I know that.
I did too.
It was a great building. It was a great building, but
Beautiful design and concept and everything else. The thing we couldn't get past was just the parking requirements, because it was a very significant, variance from what the parking were. Am my understanding that the building it's changed somewhat in the size of it, or what it's being used, or it's still having the not apartments, I guess, but residential things on the upper floors and all?
So, yeah,
Single story.
Story structure.
Oh,
and so you've seen this, I don't know who all was there.
yeah, I might have not seen.
So it was the variance, and that was more palatial building. And then they came back with the rebuild plan. And this group saw that in the context of reviewing the new facade from an architectural review standpoint.
Okay.
And that's when we kind of talked about the building stuff and introduced that phasing concept to the commission. This is the intent. We want to make sure that you can let the facade, because this proposal will result in a new facade. And to more or less mimic the size of Gracie's Annex as far as height width.
I missed that part. Apologize.
Okay, can't make every meeting.
So I guess from my standpoint, my husband is a union carpenter. So I understand about scheduling and I hear about it a lot and how things can go wrong and about safety. And so that's of course a big concern. I guess coming to the city and saying, hey, this has happened. What should we do? This isn't what we planned, probably would have been a great step. I hate to stop work on a project that's going to end up being, pretty cool and historically similar to what's around. Also realizing that could cause this to remain like that. That is, all kind of going through my head, right? And then also though, everybody else had to do the things, but I also know a lot of money has been spent to do it the way that it was required from the beginning, so.
where it's rubbed me wrong is that from the very beginning, when the side of the building was opened up with the owner, and it sat there and sat there and sat there, and it's in the preservation community, it's known as demolition by neglect, knowing that the building is going to get to the condition where they have to take the building down, which they got there. Maybe, but
I think this,
I've spent a lot of money on saving buildings that probably should have come down, but and then it was just a minute. And the architect or whoever the guy was that made the presentation, when he didn't get what he wanted, kind of stomped his feet a little bit and said, I don't remember his exact words,
He's
but
on Zoom if you'd like to talk to him.
oh, great. Yeah. It's like, I don't remember what you said exactly, but basically that I'm going to, fine, if you guys aren't going to approve this, I'm going to, whatever. So that history rubbed me wrong.
mm-hmm.
And then now this to me looks like we're going to do what we want and you're going to slap our hands and we'll get what we want eventually. And I don't like that. So.
We weren't trying to take advantage or pull a fast one on anybody in any kind of way. And I apologize if it came out that way or kind of visually looks like that, but in no way, shape or form are we trying to run and do our own things. I mean, really it was out of the necessity of keeping people safe. And I can provide many more photos. I have over 375 pictures of this project over the last 5 months that we've been working on it. And in no way, shape or form have we been trying to veer away from or neglect the phasing that's been occurring. Our most recent inspection was on April 29th to look at the damp proofing and waterproofing. So the city inspector has been out there to take a look at this and has been since January, since we've been working on it.
Just in response to Brooke, to your comment, we felt like we had that communication with Mike, our inspector. And so we thought we had a great open communication about how things were going. And so we honestly, we were blindsided by this. We thought that, we had an understanding, and this came as a surprise because we had very open communication and like Chris said, an inspection just the same before, so we're proceeding, thinking everything's going, we're making good decisions and everything's going good. But we weren't trying to backdoor anybody or not talk about it or.
And part of my view too, Jacob was talking about different lenses. I've been to the site multiple times. I put in the power. So talking with the contractor and the foreman on site and all, so it gives me a little bit of a different view of, what's gone on throughout the process. I haven't been out there in a little bit because obviously you can see the power's in, or the temporary power. But that's kind of a view from where I'm coming from too, is I had been on site and talked to them multiple times.
Right.
So again, more that's running around in my head.
It's nice to put a face to the name.
I'm perfect.
Yeah.
Can you look at that picture and say it's not new construction?
No, but I see what you're saying 100%, but it was always going to be completely replaced. It was just the manner and how it happened.
Talking about
But I totally get where you're coming from, because I know how you feel about historic buildings, as do I. And this one was just.
And the finish of it still adheres to the architectural historic finishes. Once the end product is going to be done, it does adhere to the architectural standards that went through that process.
I know. I remember the conversation about we don't want to look like Starbucks and all this thing.
I wasn't here for the
So,
conversation. No, they were, that signed up last year and.
The architect's asking if they can speak.
Yes.
Oh, sure.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I've been trying to be unmuted so I could chime in here. There's a lot of things that everyone has touched on, and just to kind of go back to that original presentation, we were trying to present two scenarios, one where we get the variance and we could build this larger structure versus if we keep the building and in the future build on top of it. We did not get the variance, and I kind of resent the fact that I was characterized as harumping and not getting what I wanted. In fact, we kind of took several steps back and said, okay, then let's rebuild the building. That's the most important thing. So I can't speak to the fact that this has been neglected by demo or demo by neglect, as you say. I can't speak to that fact. All I can say is that we're trying to rebuild an existing structure. And yes, there is an important zoning exemption attached to that. So I do kind of want to flag that as something I don't agree with. What we are trying to rebuild, and as the construction team has demonstrated, they are following the phases as deliberated between the planning department and the building department, and they are still continuing to build it as a phased construction. Whether this is new construction or a remodel, sorry, you had mentioned that this is still going to be new construction in the end. Yes, it is. How we get there is by phased construction, and that's what's agreed upon with the planning department, and that's what we continue to do. So yes, it will be new construction in the end, the building itself. However, how we get there is a phased construction.
Good.
Yeah, I agree that we had a plan, but the phase construction never showed only two walls.
So Jacob, the planning code and building code is not always so black and white. There's a lot of nuance. And one thing that the planning code lacks is construction means and methods. If the construction team is saying that there was a matter of life safety and or delays in construction and they had to take steps to correct that, that's outside of your jurisdiction. That's outside of your scope of work. That's outside of my expertise when it comes to construction means and methods. That's up to the construction team.
It would have required a building permit plan revision, which was not submitted. We approved a phasing plan with the building permit set. That was not followed.
And I believe that's where Artis is saying we should have come to the city because of this. And so they're asking for forgiveness. So we're not trying to pull a fast one over you guys. We're not trying to build this differently. We're still building it in phases. Whether something got demolished ahead of plan, that's why we're here. That's why we're having this discussion.
Only avenue we had was to talk to Mike, so we didn't know if, like, I mean, we're just contractors. We don't, we don't have access to, we don't even, all these meetings and stuff, we never went to them. We're just here trying to execute this project.
Yeah, and I'm only speaking because I stamped the phasing plan and this is not it. That's our authority, is to say, yep, this complies with the development code. This is what we talked about. And there's an inspection process for that. And yeah, Mike is kind of your conduit. Planning also conducts our own inspections.
So on the next activity that was going to be taking place, after whenever the stop work notice hit, we're supposed to be setting our columns and our west wall, so then we can then set the roof. In order to get that roof set, you have to have the 4 columns in place per the phasing plan. One of them is on the east wall, 2 of them are at the mid span, and then one of them is on the west wall as a center bearing line for that structure. So that with the stop work notice that it hit, our next activities are to set those elements in place. So the lack of coordination from the subcontractor and those few days of that lost time there resulted in the structure just looking in the way that it is currently right now. Had the stop work notice not been issued and we're able to just continue to proceed with the work, we wouldn't be looking at the same condition that we are right now. It would have more of the elements that maintain the city's definition of what a structure should be. We're talking about a few working days of time here. April 29th was our last inspection on the project. A weekend went by, and then we had the stop work notice was issued that following Wednesday on May 7th. We're not trying to pull a fast one or anything like that, as we've said many times now. Wholeheartedly are trying to phase the project as shown in our original timestamp schedule. It's got multiple phases thrown throughout, many photos and documentation to show that we did indeed phase it. As I mentioned before, if this was new construction, none of us would be here having this conversation because we would have been done a few weeks ago. I also kind of would just like to know too, I mean, if the vote goes south, right, if it doesn't go into favor and we don't get the grace of the committee, how long is it going to take for the redevelopment or the redesign to then happen? And then the rework of that, it could be sitting and looking like this for 6-8 months. I'm not too sure. I don't know what the review times are and what those implications might be, but I don't know if this is what everybody wants to look at for an extended period of time.
The reality is it just might never happen. I mean, the economic feasibility might not be there. That's not for us to say, but we just
trying to look at it from a practical lens.
There's kind of an element of we feel accountable, but there's a notion of the punishment should match the crime. This to say scrap your whole project and all the work that's done and go back to the starting point is just, that's a huge, I mean, that just makes me sick to my stomach. That's just a huge thing. That doesn't match the weight, in my opinion. I mean, I think because this is a new thing, no one's done it like this, and it's just weird. Like, there's no set thing like, oh well, there's a fine or something, or I don't know. There's no thing. It's just, I don't know. But we're willing to accept. We're big boys. We'll take punishment. It is what it is. We didn't do it on purpose, but we're big boys.
it happened the way it happened, and now they need to go through the proper procedure. Just one person here.
You're not asking for a vote tonight. This isn't even on the agenda.
It's not even the agenda.
You know, it was, I thought on the short term, we can try to get a read
Yeah.
and, maybe base our actions based on that read. So that was my intent. So you could vote, at least then that helps us quantify the read.
I thought that's what was last Wednesday, whenever we were having the conversation, you said that there would be a vote.
This isn't an application. This is we messed up.
Yeah, it's
There's no.
it's guidance to staff. That's what it is.
What was told.
I understand the safety aspect of it. That probably needed to come down, but those risks probably should have been seen on the front end of the roof probably needed to come down or the wall needed to come down before the phase project. So I think that would have been known up front.
There's a lot hinging on that phasing plan, and that we didn't dictate that was the risk that you take.
And if the roof was that close to collapsing, was it realistic to begin with? And those are questions we can't answer at this point.
It's against Oregon state law to have people inside a collapsing building.
I think just
the violation.
Or then maybe the whole beginning of this project was a mistake.
Yeah, maybe it was
Hard to
that
tell.
plan.
hard to tell until we
It's
go
not our
that far
fault.
in, like we can't take that out without this falling over, it just.
Not here to focus on problems. We're really just looking for solutions and the path forward. Just, you guys as humble, honest people, and a mistake had been made, and we're here to just own up to that and explain our case and hopefully find resolution and move forward.
The thing that bothers me is that they said back, the city was involved in this. Building inspections did happen along the way. And got to this point, and then all of a sudden you get the stop order, just not even a week after the last permit inspection.
I think our building official could speak to those inspections.
I understand, that's,
He's not here.
It's been great. There's nothing against Mike or anything like that. We're not looking at singling anybody out and say that for record.
So I will say, that last inspection, when I noticed it and I brought it up, Mike was like, oh yeah, we just got a photo on this. And so looked at the photo and he mentioned was that wall missing? And I don't know if he thought much of it at the time, but when I brought it up, we looked at that photo because my first photo of this, I think, was April 30th. And so it looked like based on those inspection photos, then maybe had been earlier. So it was sort of in the back of Mike's mind, but it came to the forefront when I noticed that. I'm like, whoa, mentioned something.
It's the heart of this, we're talking about a matter of days, and so it's all same facing, so.
And I'm gonna have to disagree with you, Dan. I mean, I agree with you, but also I know that things happen, and do we risk what could be a potentially lovely building downtown or an empty lot with two walls that will likely stay if that project doesn't continue? Like, are we not seeing the forest for the trees? But I'm like, I'm just one person. I just know that in construction, things happen.
We see
That's my
who,
take.
it's not really a vote, but let's see who's in favor of letting them move forward as it is and who is in favor of having them consider new construction.
well, I mean, the only other thing I would say, and it's already kind of been said, is that the end result was going to be a new building no matter what, is what I'm understanding. And I do think I see good evidence that the intent was to follow phasing, whether it was exactly the phasing that was part of the plan. I don't know that for sure or anything on that part of it. And so to me, I'm kind of in the same boat as Brooke, I think, in terms of I'd want to see it go forward.
Yeah, I vote for granting grace.
What do you?
I'd be worried about the precedents we'd be setting of pivoting. I do understand the safety aspect, the construction, things change. But then you're setting a precedent of, we basically should have been in new construction from the start. So.
And I'm a new construction, so we're split.
You too. Guidance that you wanted, right, Jacob?
Yeah, we want to provide you a lot of help, Jacob.
So,
Throw out the white flag.
well, we also are missing some commissioners. That's that. We can't beat a dead horse anymore.
Stalemate there.
Would the next steps be a proper application for, I mean, how does this work next?
Oh, since this came up and it was surprised me, I figured, well, we'll see how this goes and go from there.
Good. Thank you.
So what are the next steps, I guess?
Nobody knows. Nothing's been decided yet, I guess, is what.
Yeah, staff was looking for guidance and we have even split guidance, so we'll have to think about it.
Staff decision essentially.
Does it go to another appeal or is there another commission?
This isn't an appeal, this is an informal, this is. We're enabled this opportunity to have this discussion based on the unique circumstances of the site. There's no formality here, but if the commission, the majority was like, well, we should continue, that would change how we do things from now. At this point, we have kind of a split and I don't have any firm answers based on that at this particular moment in time at 9:04 on May 13th.
Think procedurally in the future on anything like that, that we should require the documentation of the building before the. Photographically, we said that in our hearings, but it should be required that we document historic buildings before they get to this point. And have it part of the record. So in the future, you refer to it.
We had lots of, what do you mean? The inside or?
Just put as much documentation on the building as possible from it.
I mean, that building over the years has been.
I know,
Yeah.
I've been following too. I probably have 100 pictures on my phone. So, I just think that there's would be documentation. What you guys don't know, and on my building, before I was on the planning commission, just I had to fight to get those windows up there.
I do.
Hours and hours and hours of looking at film and anything I could look at to figure out what that front of that building looked
I
like.
do know that.
So. I do like what they propose putting up, but I just feel like it's kind of the like guy that cut the 200-foot tree down and then calls for a slap on the head and pull the trees down. What do we do now? Here's your $50 fine.
I understand where you're coming from, but I also want to
They've incurred,
downtown to be.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, I don't know how much they've incurred, but they've incurred a lot of expenses by doing it in the phase, what they've done.
Yeah.
It's not the phase
Yeah.
thing, but
It's not an efficient method of construction.
No,
Right. Moving forward.
I feel like
well,
exhausted.
that answered the question that I asked you at the beginning.
Full circle. This is a big FYI item.
It was.
Does anyone have any questions about the planning director decisions that were previously emailed to you? And then, so on proactive items, I have a question on the architectural standards. We agreed to start with the windows. Where do we go from here? What's happening now, or what do we do now on that?
Well, the idea was, so I showed you some of those examples. And the idea was to focus. So I think one, all right, it's you agreed to focus on windows. So then geographic area. Do you want to stay down here? Do you want to go citywide? That's a question. If you want to stay down here, then you have a manageable sample size. So you can look, there's a lot of different things you can do. But it's ultimately figuring out what do we want for windows? So for example, do you want to have just a minimum glazing standard? Like I discussed at the joint meeting, should walls facing streets have a certain amount of windows, and that's your glazing standard, a certain percent, one window of at least minimum dimension. But the first thing is, what's your hope? And then we can figure out how to codify it. So what's your area? Are there good examples in that area? Are there bad examples in that area? Why is it a bad example? Do we want to try to prevent this? How can we prevent this? Here's a good example. Great. How can we incentivize this? Is this something we want to make sure we can require? So we kind of have to figure out what we like, what we don't like. We got to focus on windows. So next is geographic extent, I think, because that's going to be your sample size. If it's the whole city, well, got a pretty big sample size to worry about.
So I feel like it should be the whole city only because they're building like.
Yeah, we have a few
trampolines
infill lots
all
here,
over the
but
place.
I think it should be too, I agree. Just because we're gonna deal with either subdivisions or infill lots here and there. I think it's more meaningful that it is the new construction that's.
Okay, so then that's a broader concept. So, okay, and hopefully everybody else agrees with the geographic.
Just think we're gonna have different viewpoints if we're talking about new construction versus in the waterfront area. Because you have all these new neighborhoods pop up that do look similar to each other. They may not be exactly what it looks like downtown, but they do look similar to each other within their own space.
Right. And
Well, the standards could be, we could have
it'd be outside of the river district.
different standards for the different areas.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. It's just the magnitude is what.
Well, it's just like the
Okay.
example that Jacob, I don't recall who was at the joint meeting and who wasn't, but the example I thought was a really good one that you showed the side of that townhouse that has no windows and it would totally architecturally change it. If we,
South facing too.
yeah, and south
Yeah.
facing, so.
Okay, geographic extent, and then what are your concerns about windows? What do you don't like? So maybe think about, just in your normal commute or what, don't spend days walking around looking for two stones to carry around. Just think of examples when you're driving through town and like, oh yeah, that's a good example. Oh yeah, that's a bad example. And maybe get a picture or get a Google Street View and bring that as, and then you can fight over good and bad examples.
I think that there should be some kind of trim around the windows instead of butting the siding right to the window.
Yeah, so that's one of the questions.
So,
Okay, do you want the windows on certain sides? Okay, what size should it be? What elements should it have, including trim? So it's what you want to make of it. But start, as long as you take baby steps, ultimately, you've over time hiked the entire Pacific Crest Trail with those baby steps.
just like, we're not trying to say that all you can build is bungalows, or all you can build is, like a modern mid-century revival could have some trim, or a bungalow could have some trim, so it's all right. And then on the vacant and underutilized storefronts, that's Commissioner Jacobson. He's not here, so we obviously don't have an update on that.
Do we want to give a little update on why Plaza's not?
Yes. And just,
Minutes.
yeah, just to address, it was in the minutes that we backed off the plaza temporarily because the city and the county are having some heated discussions and things are working out, and we felt like it would be a good time to kind of air that for a little bit and then get back to it.
So it's not gone from our minds.
Yep.
It's just gone from the agenda for a little while.
And
We feel the same way you do, don't worry.
I am concerned about the absences of commissioners. I think it affected this really important inquiry. It wasn't a hearing. And it's the same people over and over again. I don't know who sets the standard. I personally think that having it set that you have 3 unexcused absences is way too much. Because it just would require another phone call to say, hey, can't come, as long as they give you notice and one meeting a year. And but the way I understand it stands is if you have 3 unexcused absences and then it's an issue, is that the standard?
And I think they have to be consecutive.
And they have to be consecutive.
And it's, yeah.
Hard measure to meet and to,
Commissioner Rosengard said he's had a sore throat and a fever. So that was his reasoning. I don't, he emailed both Dave and I, I don't know about the others, but. Did you hear from the others?
Yes, Scott said he would not be able to make it, but that, if there was issue with a quorum, to contact him. And then Reed was out on the road traveling for work or something, wouldn't be able to make it in time.
as I say this, I won't be at the next meeting. I'll be on vacation, so.
There we go.
But I'm always here. I'm usually always calling.
I rely on that.
Yeah, so, but anyway, I think that, I don't know how we could look at that, who has the authority to change that policy or, but I think it's too much of a broad, never gonna reach.
Seems a little too lenient.
Yeah.
I mean, we can make it a discussion item so we can look at the language and. Fortunately, it's not the development code where we have the arduous process of notifying the state 35 days in advance, having a staff report, meeting all the stupid state guidelines.
Yeah.
It's the simple ordinance fix. So.
It does seem like something that council would weigh in on too.
Sure. Yeah. But they would want the recommendation from the commission probably, so
Sure.
we can, start talking about it and. Yeah, June, the next joint meeting's next month.
I mean,
We have. Is it
I
appropriate
don't think
to-
we should talk about it at the
Probably
next
not.
meeting because she's not gonna be here.
You'll be here. So, yeah.
How about July?
why don't you just hold that topic?
July.
Remind us next time to put it on the agenda because there's no point in putting it on if you're the one
Yeah.
bringing it and you're not
Yep.
gonna be here.
I would agree with that. I'll be here in July. All right, any council report, liaison report?
Unless you got anything you want me to
Back in,
go to take back.
I don't think so.
It's a big important week because budget meeting number 2 is on Thursday. I know it's been a while since that. Do you remember needing to have a third budget meeting? I can't remember in recent history.
I thought we had one a couple of years ago.
Maybe.
I think we did.
But, more intense discussion this year than many years just because of the budget situation.
Okay. All right, with that, I think unless anybody has anything, we're adjourned.